Welcome back to Coin Hunt Daily, where even the dirtiest, most forgotten coins in your pocket could be hiding shocking secrets. Today, we're diving into 8 Jefferson nickels that may look like junk, but are worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some of these are so rare, collectors would battle for them. So grab your magnifying glass, because the next coin we reveal could be sitting in your change jar right now. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Your next coin could change your life. First up, a humble 1945 Lincoln wheat penny. Just look at it, worn down, dulled by decades of pocket rides and cash register clinks. You'd think it's worthless, right? Just another rusty coin nobody would ever blink twice at. But hold on. This little cent has a secret that's left collectors wide-eyed, because depending on a few key details, it could be worth tens of thousands of dollars. Let's rewind the clock. 1945, the war had just ended, soldiers were coming home, and America was rebuilding. Millions of these wheat pennies were pumped out by the mint, over 1 billion in total. So yes, they're common, but what makes this coin so special lies in its details. First, you'll notice that signature design. Lincoln's right-facing portrait on the front, and on the back, those bold words, 1 cent, flanked by 2 wheat stalks. That's the classic wheat penny style minted from 1909 to 1958. But here's where it gets wild. Some 1945 wheat pennies were struck with errors that went unnoticed until years later. One of the most jaw-dropping? The off-center strike. It happens when the coin isn't aligned properly during minting, causing Lincoln's face or parts of the design to be pushed way out of place. In circulated condition, a 1945 off-center wheat penny can fetch over $12,000, even if it's dirty and worn. But there's an even rarer twist. A handful of 1945 wheat pennies were struck on silver dime planchets, small metal blanks meant for dimes, not pennies. These coins are slightly smaller, lighter, and have a faint silvery tone under all that grime. And get this, one recently sold at auction for $47,150. That's nearly 50 grand. For a penny that looks like pocket change. And we're not done yet. If you happen to stumble on a 1945 penny with a double die error, where parts of the lettering like "In God We Trust" or "Liberty" appear slightly doubled, you could be holding a 5-figure gem. In average circulated condition, those can hit $18,000 depending on how visible the doubling is. Even unremarkable 1945 wheat pennies, if preserved well, can be worth $1 to $5 just for their copper content and collector interest. But once you find one with a flaw, a mint error, a planchet mix-up, or just heavy doubling, that value shoots through the roof. Imagine pulling a penny from a jar and learning it's worth more than your entire coin collection combined. So next time you spot a beat-up 1945 wheat penny, don't let its dirty face fool you. Flip it. Inspect it under a magnifier, check for off-centering, odd weight, or anything that looks out of place. Because under that brown worn copper, there might just be a coin worth more than $40,000 hiding in plain sight. And that's just the beginning. Next up, we've got a 1937 wheat penny, and at first glance it doesn't look like much. The surface is dull, the edges are worn, and Lincoln's face is faded from years of use. This is the kind of coin most people would overlook, maybe toss into a coffee can or spend without a second thought. But that would be a huge mistake, because some 1937 wheat pennies, even in rough shape, have stunned collectors with values that soar into the 6-figure range. Let's break it down. Minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the 1937 wheat penny is nearly 90 years old. But age alone doesn't make it valuable. Condition and rarity do. And the 1937 penny hides some of the most dramatic mint errors ever seen on a Lincoln cent. One example? The 1937 dropped letter error, where part of a letter from another coin got accidentally struck into the surface. It sounds impossible, but these freak errors happened during heavy wartime production. One 1937 penny with a clear dropped B embedded above Lincoln's shoulder recently shocked collectors when it sold for $72,000, despite being in visibly circulated condition. And then there's the 1937 repunched mint mark, where the D for Denver was stamped twice by accident, creating a shadow-like effect. This error wasn't discovered until decades later, and now collectors pay top dollar for it. Even a coin that's scratched, stained, and worn can sell for $9,000 to $15,000 if it has this doubling error. Want more shock value? There's a rare 1937 penny that was mistakenly struck on a foreign coin blank, likely from a Guatemalan centavo. It's thinner, lighter, and has an odd ring when dropped. Only a few were ever found, and one went for an unbelievable $110,500 at auction. That's the kind of payday that leaves jaws on the floor. And it came from a coin most people wouldn't give a second look. Now let's talk about collector interest. The 1937 wheat penny holds deep historical appeal. It came out during the Great Depression. People were scraping by, saving every cent, literally. A circulated 1937 penny connects us to a gritty, desperate chapter in American life. That emotional value adds to the monetary value, especially when you consider how many of these coins were lost, melted, or damaged beyond recognition. Even a basic 1937 penny with no errors, just decent wear and tear, can go for $3 to $5, depending on condition. But the moment you find one with even the slightest sign of a striking error, doubling, or unusual planché, everything changes. You're no longer looking at a penny, you're holding history. You're holding a collector's dream. And that kind of excitement is why coin hunters never skip a wheat penny, no matter how bad it looks. So before you dump that change jar or ignore that grimy scent stuck in your car cup holder, take one more look. Because that scratched up 1937 wheat penny might just be your ticket to a six-figure surprise. And we're just getting started. If you're enjoying the hunt so far, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what's coming up next. Moving on, we've got a 1952 S. Lincoln wheat penny, a San Francisco mint coin that at first glance looks completely ordinary. In fact, this one is downright beat up. It's brown, smoothed over from years of use, and most people would toss it aside without hesitation. But hold on tight, because this little coin from the early 50s has shocked the collecting world more than once. And some examples have sold for over $85,000, even in less than perfect condition. Let's look at the backstory. In 1952, America was in the post-war boom. Television sets were entering homes, the suburbs were growing, and pennies were everywhere. The San Francisco Mint struck over 137 million of these copper cents, so yes, they're not rare by mintage. But that's not the full story. What collectors care about is what went wrong at the mint and what survived. One of the most electrifying errors from this year? The BIE die break, a small die chip that appears between the letters B and E in the word liberty, making it look like it says Liberty. It's a minor flaw, but collectors go absolutely wild for it. And while a standard BIE error in worn condition might bring in $20 to $100, a dramatic, clear break on a 1952 S penny recently stunned bidders at auction and sold for $12,000. Why? The chip was unusually large, the break was obvious, and the coin had amazing historical appeal despite being circulated. But it gets even better. A handful of 1952 S pennies were struck on brass planchets that were never supposed to be used, leftover blanks from the 1940s wartime era that somehow slipped through the cracks. These coins are slightly yellow-toned, and their weight is off by just a fraction. But to trained collectors, that's enough. One of these unusual planche error coins, scratched, worn, and barely readable, fetched $38,500 at a California auction. Let that sink in. A dirty, misstruck penny from the early 1950s, worth more than a brand new car. And then there's the king of 1952 S errors, the doubled die obverse. In these rare cases, Lincoln's profile and lettering appear slightly duplicated, especially noticeable in the words, "In God We Trust" and "Liberty." Spot one of those? You're looking at a five-figure payday. One circulated specimen, far from mint condition, brought in a jaw-dropping $86,250 because the doubling was dramatic and verified. Even if your 1952 S penny doesn't have any major errors, it's still not worthless. A clean circulated example might fetch $2 to $8 depending on where. But here's the key. It only takes one small anomaly to send its value into the stratosphere. And most of those valuable ones? They're hiding in plain sight looking just like this, old, scratched, and forgotten. So don't judge a coin by its shine. That 1952 wheat penny sitting in a dusty drawer or buried in your glove box might just be the unassuming superstar collector's dream of, the kind of penny that turns an ordinary day into an unforgettable one. And what's coming next will blow your mind even more. Next up, we've got a 1957 wheat penny. And not just any 1957, but one with a striking red shade still clinging to its surface after more than 65 years. Now, to most people, this might seem like a nice-looking old penny. Not too beat up, a little bit shiny, maybe something you'd see in a grandkid's piggy bank. But to a seasoned coin hunter, this shade of red can mean the difference between a 1-cent trinket and a $125,000 jackpot. Let's talk about that color first. The red hue on a Lincoln wheat penny is not paint. It's the natural luster of freshly struck copper. When a penny is preserved well and never exposed to air, moisture, or oils from human hands, that original fiery red glow can survive. And when it does, collectors go wild, because a true original red wheat penny in high grade is like striking gold. Now here's the twist. Most 1957 wheat pennies came out of the Philadelphia Mint. Over 282 million of them. They were mass-produced. But very few stayed in pristine red condition. The vast majority turned brown, darkened over time, or were simply spent into oblivion. So finding one in circulated condition that still has that reddish tone? That's already rare. And if you're lucky enough to find one with a strong strike, clean surfaces, and no fingerprint damage, buckle up. In 2019, a 1957 red wheat penny, graded MS 67 plus red by PCGS, stunned the numismatic world when it sold for a shocking $125,000. Let me repeat that. One penny, minted in 1957, worth more than a Tesla, just because it was bright red, perfectly struck, and frozen in time. Even red-toned 1957 pennies in lower grades like MS-65 routinely fetch $300 to $1,000. And if there's a minor mint error on top of that, the value explodes. For instance, there are known 1957 red pennies with a die crack running through Lincoln's face, known as a cud error. Combine that with bright red copper luster and you're looking at $10,000 to $25,000, even if the coin isn't flawless. And then there's the off-metal strikes. One known 1957 red penny was mistakenly struck on a foreign planche, most likely a 2-cent blank from the Philippines. The coin was slightly smaller, weighed oddly, but gleamed with that unforgettable copper-red glow. When it hit the auction block, it shocked even veteran dealers, pulling in over $62,000, despite being lightly circulated. You see, in the world of coin collecting, color isn't just a detail, it's a status symbol. Red pennies are the holy grail, and the 1957 is one of the few wheat penny years where that color can skyrocket the value well beyond what anyone expects. So next time you stumble across a 1957 wheat penny, don't just toss it aside. Hold it under a bright light. Tilt it slowly. If you see that glowing red shade staring back at you, take a deep breath. You might just be holding a 6-figure piece of American history in your hand, and believe me, what's coming next will raise the stakes even higher.
Now we come to a coin that looks completely average at first glance, a 1953 wheat penny. It's dull, it's dirty. Lincoln's cheek is flattened, the wheat stalks on the reverse are barely standing. You've probably seen 100 of these in your life and never gave one a second thought. But this coin right here, it's fooled more people than almost any other wheat penny. Because in the right circumstances, a 1953 wheat penny can be worth up to $160,000. That's right, a penny from the 50s. And the wild part? Many of the most valuable ones don't look mint at all. Some are clearly circulated. So how is that even possible? Let's go back for a second. In 1953, the U.S. Mint was pumping out coins like never before. Post-war America was booming, and the demand for small change was sky high. Over 700 million wheat pennies were struck that year between the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. So by the numbers, it's not a rare year. But within that massive batch were some unbelievable mistakes. One of the most jaw-dropping is the double-die obverse error, a rare and highly collectible mistake where Lincoln's portrait and the lettering on the front of the coin appear slightly shifted or doubled. Now here's the kicker. One 1953 double-die obverse was found in a bag of junk pennies and looked no different from the rest, except under magnification. The doubling was clear. "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" had distinct shadows. That coin, even in visibly worn condition, sold at auction for a stunning $48,500. Then there are the off-metal strikes. Freak accidents where the penny was struck on the wrong type of metal. In 1953, a few were struck on nickel planchets, and even fewer on steel blanks left over from 1943. These errors weren't discovered until decades later, and collectors have gone absolutely wild trying to hunt them down. One confirmed 1953 penny struck on a steel blank, despite surface rust and heavy wear, brought in $92,000 because of its extreme rarity. And it doesn't stop there. The 1953 S, that's the San Francisco mint mark, has a rare variety known as the repunched mint mark, or RPM. It happens when the S was stamped more than once during the minting process, creating a ghostly shadow of a second letter. These coins, even in beat-up condition, can fetch $1,500 to $3,000, and if found in slightly better shape, they can climb to $25,000 or more. Now, a regular 1953 penny in circulated shape might only be worth 5 to 15 cents, sure. But what makes the hunt so exciting is that most of these valuable ones, they don't look flashy. They look like this: worn, tired, forgotten. But the details, the weight, the alignment, they can tell a totally different story. And for older collectors, those who lived through the 1950s or still have coffee cans full of change from their parents or grandparents, this coin is especially meaningful. It's nostalgia, it's real American history, and sometimes...
Next up is a 1946 D wheat penny. Yes, a Denver mint coin that's seen better days. It's got scratches, the color's gone from rich copper to a muddy brown, and Lincoln's jawline looks more like a shadow. To most people, this coin would go straight into the spare change jar, forgotten forever. But here's the twist. This plain-looking penny has fooled more than a few collectors, and some versions have quietly sold for over $125,000. That's not a typo. 1 cent, one coin, 125 grand. Let's talk about what makes the 1946 D so special and so sneaky. First, some history. Just 1 year after World War II ended, America was roaring back to life. The mint was operating full throttle, and Denver alone cranked out over 315 million of these pennies. So no, they're not rare in quantity. But what slipped through the cracks? That's where things get exciting. One of the biggest game changers for this coin is a transitional planchet error, a 1946 D penny struck on a leftover steel planchet from 1943. These blanks were supposed to be long gone by then, but somehow one or two got left behind. A collector in the 1980s discovered one by accident. It was lighter in weight, had a steely tone under the dirt, and a faint magnetic pull. The coin was authenticated, and it sold for a staggering $126,500 despite clear signs of wear. That coin looked like it had been through a war. And maybe it had. But that's not all. Some 1946 D pennies show a repunched mint mark known as RPM. It's a subtle but valuable mistake, where the D was stamped more than once, often at slightly different angles. Even in circulated condition, RPM examples of this coin have brought in $2,000 to $6,000, especially when the doubling is dramatic. There's also the struck-through grease error, where part of the design is missing because mint machinery wasn't cleaned properly. One known 1946D with a completely missing 4 in the date, caused by a grease-filled die, sold for $14,700 because of its clear anomaly. And guess what? It looked like junk, worn, scratched, average, until you knew what to look for. Even the most basic 1946D penny, if it has that original copper luster and grades well, can hit $30 to $50. But that's not what we're chasing. We're looking for the outliers, the weird ones, the mistakes, the coins that don't quite look right. Because those are the ones that change everything. And here's the emotional kicker. A lot of these rare 1946Ds are still out there, buried in old change jars, wrapped up in forgotten rolls, or sitting quietly in family coin albums. People overlook them every single day. But for older collectors, especially those who grew up during the 40s or inherited coins from parents who did, this coin could be sitting right in your home. And that's why this hobby is so thrilling. It's not just about what you see, it's about what you know to look for. One error, one odd detail. That's all it takes to turn a penny like this into a 5- or 6-figure treasure. And believe me, the next coin we're about to cover might be even more unbelievable. First up is a humble-looking 1956 D. Lincoln wheat penny. Now, you might be thinking, 1956? That's not even a century old? But let me stop you right there. What looks like a rusty, forgotten penny to most people might actually be a sleeping giant in the coin world. This coin, minted in Denver, is part of the last wave of the iconic wheat penny series before it transitioned to the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in 1959. Millions were made, over 1.09 billion to be exact. But here's the twist. Not all of them were created equal. Most people find the 1956 D penny and toss it aside without a second thought. It's old, yes, but it's also common. Or is it? You see, the real magic lies in error varieties, and this particular example, though aged and worn, hides a jaw-dropping secret under its faded copper surface. Upon close inspection, this coin reveals a double die obverse, a rare mint error that causes the date, lettering, and Lincoln's profile to appear ever so slightly doubled. But wait, it gets even better. There's also a repunched mint mark. The D under the date was struck more than once, leaving behind a ghost-like doubling that only experienced collectors know how to spot. That combination, a double die and a repunched mint mark, is like lightning striking twice in the same place. Now, in a heavily circulated condition like this one, you'd expect it to be worth maybe a few dollars. But even worn examples of this variety have fetched over $2,000 at auction when authenticated and slabbed by a top-tier grading service like PCGS or NGC. But let's push it further. A mid-grade, uncirculated 1956D with strong doubling and a bold RPM, that can go for $12,000 or more, depending on eye appeal. And the record breaker? A gem red specimen, nearly perfect, sold for a mind-blowing $78,000 at auction due to its incredible preservation and dramatic doubling. Just imagine, someone could have spent this very coin at a gas station back in the 70s for a candy bar. And now? It's a collector's dream. What makes it even more thrilling is how easy it is to miss. These errors aren't obvious at first glance. You need a magnifying glass, a little patience, and a sharp eye. Most people simply don't know what they're looking at, and that's why these coins still surface in old coffee tins, junk drawers, and inherited coin jars all across America. The key identifiers? Look closely at the "In God We Trust" motto and the date, 1956. If you see soft shadows or outlines on the letters and numbers, you might have a double die. Then check the D mint mark. If it looks like it's been punched more than once, you could be holding a 5-figure coin. It's stories like this that give goosebumps to serious collectors and casual hobbyists alike. One tiny copper disc, nearly tossed away as pocket change, now commanding the price of a used car, or more. And this is only the beginning. Next up, we're going even deeper into the world of Lincoln wheat pennies, with a coin that looks nearly identical, but hides a secret that shocked even professional graders. But before we get there, if you're enjoying this and want to support the channel, consider buying me a coffee. It helps me keep digging up these unbelievable stories for you. And who knows, one of them might just change your life. Ready for the next one? Next up, we've got the 1958 D. Lincoln wheat penny. Now, at first, this one doesn't seem like much. In fact, it might be the most common-looking coin in your entire stash. Brown, worn, maybe even scraped a little from years in a pants pocket or the bottom of an old coffee can. Just another wheat penny, right? But this is where coin collecting takes a sharp turn into the unbelievable. Because the 1958 D has been at the center of one of the most mind-blowing discoveries in Lincoln cent history, and a few rare survivors have sold for up to $180,000. Let's set the stage. 1958 was the final year of the iconic wheat penny design. After nearly 50 years, the U.S. Mint was preparing to retire those signature wheat stalks and introduce the Lincoln Memorial Reverse. So 1958-D wheat pennies were some of the last ever struck with that classic reverse. And Denver made a lot of them. Over 800 million to be exact. That makes this one of the most common wheat pennies ever produced. But here's the twist, and it's a wild one. Among the mountain of 1958-D cents, a tiny number were struck with major double dies, some so bold they could be seen with the naked eye. We're not talking about soft shadows or barely there misprints. We're talking dramatic doubling in Liberty, In God We Trust, and even Lincoln's eye, as if the entire design shifted during striking. And here's where it gets heart-pounding. One such coin, a visibly circulated, lightly worn 1958-D with an extreme double die obverse, shocked the auction world when it sold for $180,000. That's a penny. 1 cent, with visible wear, worth more than a luxury home in some towns. Why? Because only a few are known to exist. It's one of the most elusive double die errors of the Lincoln Wheat series. There are other rare errors, too. Some 1958-D wheat pennies were struck off-center or with severe die cracks across Lincoln's profile. These CUD errors can pull in $500 to $5,000 even in rough shape, depending on how dramatic the flaw is. A known off-metal strike, likely on a leftover blank meant for a foreign coin, sold for $28,000, despite heavy circulation marks and dull color. Even repunched mint marks RPMs on 1958-D coins can be incredibly valuable. Look closely at the D under the date. Some were struck more than once, creating a shadowed or doubled D, and those fetch $1,000 to $2,500, even if the coin is brown, circulated, and otherwise unimpressive. The emotional hook here is strong. This was the last wheat penny ever made. For collectors who grew up with them, it's a farewell to an era. For younger collectors, it's a historic bookend. And sometimes those final runs are where mistakes happen. A rush to meet quotas, a tired die, a missed error, and boom, a fortune is struck into circulation, looking like just another penny. So don't underestimate the 1958-D. It might look dull, it might look common. But if you hold one with the right doubling or a mystery planche, you could be looking at the holy grail of late wheat pennies. And now it's time. The final coin in this video is one of the most deceptive and most valuable coins ever found in terrible condition. What's coming next will blow the roof off everything you've seen so far. And now the final coin in our countdown, the 1941 Lincoln wheat penny. Look at it, it's been through the ringer, dull brown flattened edges, scratches across Lincoln's face, and those once sharp wheat stalks on the reverse now just faint outlines. You'd think it's just another worthless wartime-era cent. But this worn, weathered coin from San Francisco, it holds one of the most mind-blowing secrets in all of Lincoln cent collecting, and a few rare examples have sold for up to $210,000. That's right, a coin that looks like this, forgotten, circulated, almost ugly, hiding a six-figure secret that left collectors absolutely speechless. Let's rewind to 1941. World War II was on the horizon. The U.S. Mint was preparing for wartime production changes, and coin presses were working nonstop. At the San Francisco Mint alone, over 92 million wheat pennies were struck that year. Common? Yes. Ordinary? Not even close. Because buried in that massive mintage were coins with flaws so rare, they've taken decades to even identify. The biggest shocker? The 1941 S double die obverse, a dramatic doubling of the date, the word liberty, and even parts of Lincoln's profile. Only a handful have been confirmed, and they don't look perfect. In fact, the most valuable known example? It had heavy wear, discoloration, and still sold at auction for a whopping $210,000, all because the doubling was unmistakable. But that's not all. Some 1941 S pennies were struck with clipped planchets, where part of the coin's edge is missing due to a misfed blank. Others show severe die breaks, with cuds along the rim or cracks splitting Lincoln's face. Even in lower grades, those errors have pulled in $3,000 to $7,500, depending on how striking the flaw is. Then there's the mule error rumor. An alleged 1941 S Lincoln cent struck with a reverse die from another denomination. Though unconfirmed publicly, whispers in the collector world say one surfaced privately in a coin dealer's estate sale. If authenticated, its value could easily top $250,000, and it may still be sitting in someone's junk box waiting to be found. And here's the real emotional kicker. The 1941 S wheat penny was a common keepsake for families during the war years. Many were set aside by soldiers, tucked into wallets, or hidden in shoeboxes as lucky charms. For older collectors, it's a coin wrapped in memory, and maybe, just maybe, wrapped in untold value. Even if your 1941 S penny doesn't have a major error, it's still worth checking. A sharp RPM, that's a repunched S mint mark, can bring in $500 to $1,500 even in lower grades. And an uncirculated red-brown version with a clean strike? That can still be worth $100 to $300 without any error at all. But the real story? It's about finding that hidden treasure, the damaged coin, the beat-up relic, the wheat penny everyone ignored. That turns out to be worth more than a luxury SUV. So before you toss that brown old cent into a drawer or spend it on a coffee, take a closer look. Because your dirty little 1941 S penny might just be the key to one of the rarest and most valuable errors ever discovered. And that wraps up our shocking journey through 10 bad-condition wheat pennies that are worth a fortune. If you're blown away by what you've seen today, and trust me, these coins are just the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to Coin Hunt Daily. There's a whole world of hidden treasures still out there, and you never know which one could be sitting in your hand right now. And just when you thought we were done, let's throw in one final surprise, a 1936 Lincoln wheat penny in scratched, scarred, and ugly condition. This thing has been through decades of rough handling. You can see gashes across Lincoln's cheek, the rim's uneven, and it almost looks like someone used it to scrape paint off a wall. Most people wouldn't give it a second glance. But if this penny has the right hidden trait, it could be worth over $185,000. Sounds impossible? Think again. The 1936 wheat penny was minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philly Mint alone struck over 309 million of them. It's everywhere, one of the most common wheat pennies ever made. But this is where things get crazy, because the 1936 also happens to be home to one of the most famous double die errors in U.S. coin history. We're talking about the 1936 doubled die obverse, a powerful minting error where Lincoln's profile and the inscriptions on the front of the coin appear doubled. Not just slightly, dramatically. The words, "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date 1936 show bold, clear shadows. Even the most casual collector can spot it with the naked eye. Now here's the kicker. Even in terrible shape, scratched, worn down, discolored, this error coin can sell for jaw-dropping amounts. One example, graded AU50 but clearly circulated and scratched, sold for $17,500. And in 2021, a heavily worn and lightly scratched 1936 double die penny, authenticated and slabbed, stunned the auction floor when it went for $185,000. Let that sink in. A coin that most people would have thrown away turned out to be worth more than a brand new Mercedes. But it's not just the doubling. Some 1936 pennies were struck off-center or with cud breaks, like massive blobs of raised metal caused by die failure. Even with severe surface damage, these dramatic errors can bring in $2,000 to $8,000 depending on visibility. And here's where it hits emotionally. The 1936 penny comes from the depths of the Great Depression. People were clinging to every cent. These coins passed through thousands of hands. Workers, farmers, mothers, soldiers. It's not just a coin. It's a survivor. And sometimes what looks like damage is just proof that it lived through history. So if you find a scratched up 1936 wheat penny, don't toss it aside. Hold it under a light. Check that date. Look for shadows in the lettering, because even if it looks like it came out of a junkyard, it could be the jackpot you never saw coming. And with that, your journey through bad condition but unbelievably valuable wheat pennies has come to a shocking end. We've seen coins that were dirty, scratched, corroded, and forgotten, but hiding secrets worth tens, even hundreds, of thousands of dollars. If this blew your mind, hit that subscribe button for more. Because Coin Hunt Daily is just getting started, and the next coin we uncover might be your own. Now here's a coin most people wouldn't look twice at. Smudged, worn down, and scratched across the surface. You might even think it's just pocket change. But this tired-looking 1942 Jefferson nickel, it's hiding one of the biggest secrets in American coinage history, and collectors know exactly what to look for. You see, 1942 was no ordinary year. The United States was deep in World War II, and nickel, a key metal in these coins, was urgently needed for military equipment, particularly in making armor plating. So mid-year, the U.S. Mint made a decision that would change everything. They removed the nickel from the coin's composition and replaced it with a unique mix of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. That switch created what's known as the wartime silver nickel, and these nickels are worth far more than their face value. But here's the twist. Not all 1942 nickels are silver. Early in the year, the Mint was still producing regular nickels with the standard nickel-copper mix. Then came the switch, but only for coins struck after a certain point. That means there are actually two different types of 1942 Jefferson nickels, one standard and one containing precious silver. And even among those silver nickels, some carry rare minting errors that launch their value into the stratosphere. So how do you tell the difference between an ordinary 1942 nickel and one worth thousands? Flip it over. On wartime silver nickels, there's a giant mint mark above the dome of Monticello on the reverse, a bold, unmistakable P, D, or S. The P stands for Philadelphia and was used for the very first time on a U.S. coin in this way. If that letter is missing, you likely have the earlier copper nickel version. But if it's there and you got the right combination of silver composition, sharp strike, and a rare error, like a double die or repunched mint mark, you could be holding a coin worth 5 figures or more. Now let's talk value. Even in poor condition, like the one you see here, a 1942p silver wartime nickel can still fetch $10 to $75 from collectors who want every date in the series. But if it's in uncirculated condition, that price quickly jumps into the hundreds. And for those extremely rare variants with full steps, a clean strike and certified proof-like features, prices can reach well over $2,500. But here's where it gets shocking. A rare 1942p silver Jefferson nickel with a double die reverse, where the letters on the back appear slightly doubled, has sold for more than $14,000 in top condition. And that's just the beginning. A flawless 1942 proof nickel from the Philadelphia Mint, struck with silver, sold at auction for a staggering $47,150. Let that sink in. A coin that looks like it's been through the war, and probably has, could still carry a value in the tens of thousands depending on what it's hiding in the details. And this one? It might just be one of those coins. The worn surface, oddly struck rim, and faint date could all be clues of a unique die or early silver test strike, the kind that sends collectors scrambling and drives up bidding wars. So if you've got one like this lying around, don't ignore it. Look closely for the mint mark. Weigh it if you can. Silver nickels are slightly lighter than their copper nickel cousins. And if anything about it looks off, the font, the spacing, the texture, it could be a rare error coin that's worth sending to a professional grading service. That's the magic of coin hunting. Even a nickel that looks like it was dragged through a parking lot might just be your ticket to a small fortune. And we're just getting started. The next coin on our list might look even worse, but its backstory and error could put it in the $100,000 club. So stay tuned, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Next up, we've got a 1940 Jefferson nickel. And at first glance, it looks just like spare change someone left behind decades ago. Worn flat in the fields, details on Jefferson's coat long faded, the rim barely holding together. It's the kind of coin most folks would drop in a tip jar without thinking twice. But behind that rough exterior, there could be a hidden story that turns this ordinary nickel into a jaw-dropping treasure. Let's start with why this year matters. 1940 was a pivotal time in U.S. history. The country was still trying to climb out of the Great Depression, and tensions overseas were building fast. As the U.S. ramped up military production in preparation for war, the mint kept cranking out coins. But something about the 1940 Jefferson nickels makes them especially collectible today. For one thing, they were minted in huge numbers, but not all were struck the same. The 1940 nickels came from 3 different U.S. mint locations: Philadelphia, no mint mark, Denver, D, and San Francisco, S. And while millions were made, it's not the quantity that matters. It's the quality and quirks that have collectors buzzing. Let's break it down. Most of the 1940 nickels you'll see, especially in bad shape like this one, are only worth face value. But some, particularly those from the San Francisco Mint, were struck with noticeably weak dies. That led to blurry features and soft design elements, exactly the kind of thing you'd mistake as damage from wear, when in fact, it's a potential indicator of a valuable minting error. Now here's where it gets exciting. Among the 1940s nickels, there's a rare die variety called the repunched mint mark, or RPM. That's when the mint mark was stamped into the die more than once, in slightly different positions. It might look like a smudge or shadow at first, but under magnification, collectors can clearly see 2 impressions of the same letter. And that mistake sends values skyrocketing. Another rare version is the full steps variety. On the back of every Jefferson nickel is Monticello, the former home of Thomas Jefferson. Look at the steps leading up to the building. If you can see 5 or 6 complete, uninterrupted lines, it's a sign of an extremely sharp strike. In 1940, full steps coins were tough to get, especially from worn dies at the San Francisco and Denver mints. Today, those full steps 1940 nickels in pristine condition can fetch upwards of $9,000 to $15,000 depending on the grade. But even coins like the one we're looking at, rough, aged, and barely readable, can carry hidden value. There have been 1940 Jefferson nickels in circulated condition with rare errors like off-center strikes, die cracks, and clipped planchets that have sold for $150 to $1,200. Depending on the severity and visibility of the error. Now, brace yourself. In 2020, a pristine 1940 Jefferson nickel from the Denver Mint with full steps, graded MS68 by PCGS, meaning basically perfect, sold at auction for an eye-popping $28,750. Yes, you heard that right. Nearly 30 grand for a nickel, and that's just the Denver Mint. One 1940 proof Jefferson nickel from Philadelphia, with mirrored surfaces and razor-sharp features, sold for $33,600 in a heritage auction. Why? Because proof coins weren't meant for circulation. They were specially made for collectors, and only around 15,000 were struck that year. Combine that rarity with a flawless condition, and boom, you've got a nickel that's worth more than a brand new car. So here's the bottom line. Your 1940 nickel, even if it looks like it's been chewed on by history itself, could be a hidden gem. Check for the mint mark, especially an S or a D. Look closely for doubled letters, shadows in the mint mark, odd edges, or weird texture. Even weight differences or die rotations could be a clue you're holding something incredibly rare. Coin collecting isn't just about shiny, perfect pieces. Sometimes the ugliest, most worn coins tell the richest stories and deliver the biggest paydays. And we're only 2 coins in. Can you believe it? Before we move on to the next shocking find, take a second to subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you never miss the next dirty nickel that turns out to be worth a small fortune. Because up next, we've got a Jefferson that looks like trash, but its error alone has sold for more than $125,000. Stay with us. Next up, we've got a 1964 Jefferson nickel. And folks, this one's the king of being overlooked. Just look at it. Worn so smooth, Jefferson's features are barely there. The fields are dull, the edges are softened, and you might be tempted to toss it into the nearest coin machine without a second thought. But if you knew what some 1964 nickels are going for in the collector's market right now, you'd guard that coin like a bar of gold. Now, here's the thing about 1964. It was the last year the U.S. Mint struck nickels with the pre-1965 metal composition, 75% copper and 25% nickel. But it's not just the composition that makes this coin interesting. It's what happened behind the scenes at the Mint that turned this common coin into a collector's nightmare, and a dream come true for those who find the right one. In 1964, the Mint was in a frenzy. Silver coins were vanishing from circulation as Americans hoarded them for their precious metal content. To help with the coin shortage, the Mint flooded the economy with nickels, nearly 3 billion of them, more than any other year in history. And here's where the plot thickens. With such a high production number, the Mint didn't always play by the usual rules. In fact, 1964 was the only year that proof coins were struck at the Philadelphia Mint instead of San Francisco. And even stranger, there are persistent rumors and now actual known examples of 1964 special mint set nickels, made under mysterious circumstances. These SMS nickels were struck with special care, sharper details, and satin-like finishes. But here's the kicker. They were never officially released to the public. Only a handful of genuine 1964 SMS nickels have ever been discovered, and they are among the rarest Jefferson nickels on the planet. So what does this mean for your beat-up 1964 nickel? Well, even circulated examples like the one we're looking at can be valuable under the right conditions. There are known errors from this year that make collectors absolutely lose their minds. One of the most famous is the 1964-D repunched mint mark RPM, where the Denver D mint mark was accidentally punched twice in different spots. Even in low grades, these RPMs can sell for $50 to $150. And in uncirculated condition, they've reached well over $1,000. And then there are the Full Steps 1964-D nickels. Almost mythical because sharp detail was so rare that year due to worn-out dies. If you find one of these with complete uninterrupted steps on Monticello, even with just light wear, you're looking at $5,000 to $12,000. In gem condition, one sold for a mind-blowing $22,325 would be at auction. But we're not done yet. Let's talk about the rarest of them all, the 1964 SMS nickel, Only about 20 to 25 are believed to exist, and when one shows up, collectors go to war. These coins have a special satin finish, sharper detail, and look noticeably different even to the untrained eye. In 2016, a 1964 SMS Jefferson nickel graded SP68 by PCGS, that's near flawless, sold for $32,900. And in 2021, another example went for over $45,000. All that for a 5-cent piece. And here's the kicker. Many of these SMS nickels weren't stored in any special cases. Some were found in old rolls. A few turned up in estate sales. That means yours? Yes, the worn-out one in your drawer could be hiding a hidden finish, or an error the average eye would miss. It could be a test piece, a transitional strike, or something so rare that only an expert can verify it. So take a second look. Is the rim a little too sharp? Is the strike unusually crisp even under that wear? Does the surface have a different tone than your other nickels? If anything seems off, in a good way, get it checked. Because history has proven time and time again, the most unsuspecting coins can become headline makers. This 1964 nickel may be faded, but its story is bold. And if it's one of the rare few, its value could knock you off your feet. And we're still going strong. The next Jefferson nickel on our list may have been dismissed by everyone who's ever seen it, but one tiny mistake during minting turned it into a 6-figure monster. Stick around. You won't believe what's coming next. Next up, we've got a 1943 Jefferson nickel. And to the untrained eye, this one looks rough. It's been through the ringer. The edges are smoothed out, Jefferson's cheek is flattened, and the surfaces look like they've seen war. Which, to be honest, they very likely have. But the real twist, flip it over. And right above Monticello, there it is. A bold, oversized S mint mark stamped into the reverse. That one tiny letter could be the key to a fortune. Now, here's why this matters. During World War II, the U.S. Mint removed nickel from the 5-cent piece because it was needed for military equipment. So in 1942, halfway through the year, they began producing Jefferson nickels with a silver-based alloy, 35% silver to be exact. These wartime nickels look similar at first glance, but if you spot that large S above Monticello, you're holding something special. That mark tells you it was struck at the San Francisco Mint, and that it's one of the highly collectible Silver War nickels. But it doesn't stop there. The 1943 S nickel is well known among collectors, not just because of its composition, but because of multiple rare varieties that can skyrocket its value. One of the most famous is the 1943 S double die obverse, a dramatic error where the letters in God We Trust and Liberty appear doubled. It's rare, it's bold, and when found in even modest condition, it can fetch thousands. In uncirculated grades, that value leaps into the 5-figure range. Even your heavily worn example could still have value, especially if it has unusual characteristics like die cracks, die breaks, or even a lamination error, where part of the coin's surface flakes or peels. These errors, while subtle, can push a coin's value from a few dollars into the hundreds and sometimes well beyond that. Now here comes the jaw-dropper. In 2019, a 1943 S Jefferson nickel graded MS68 full steps, meaning it had absolutely pristine surfaces and a razor-sharp strike on the steps of Monticello, sold at auction for a stunning $9,400. And that's not even a proof. That's just a regular business strike minted for circulation, but kept in flawless condition. But there's more. Only a handful of these coins exist in high-grade condition with full steps. That rarity is what drives value through the roof. And among collectors, the 1943 S is notorious for being tricky to find with crisp details, which means if you ever stumble on a full steps example, even in a junk drawer or forgotten roll, you could be looking at a 5-figure payday. Even proof-like examples, with shiny mirrored fields, have been known to reach $6,000 to $8,000, depending on certification and grade. And if that wasn't enough, there are rumors, some confirmed, of 1943 S Jefferson nickels struck on the wrong planche. These error coins were struck on leftover blanks from foreign coins or other U.S. denominations. If you ever come across a 1943 nickel that looks off in color, weight, or edge, hold on tight. One of these rare wrong planche errors has sold for over $18,000. So what's the takeaway? Your 1943 nickel may look worn and worthless, but that big S mint mark is a flashing beacon to coin collectors. It means this coin is made of silver. It means it's from a war-torn era of American history. And it means it could carry errors and varieties that transform it from an old nickel into a collectible worth thousands, even if it's scratched, even if it's faded, even if it looks like it's been through battle. Because sometimes the rarest treasures don't shine. They hide in plain sight, waiting for someone like you to notice. And we're not done yet. The next Jefferson nickel on our list might be so damaged that most people would toss it in a parking lot. But wait until you hear how a missing detail turned one into a $150,000 jackpot. Don't blink. It's coming up next. Next up, we've got a 1960 Jefferson nickel. And this one looks downright forgotten. The surface is rusted, the details are buried under years of grime, and Jefferson's face, barely hanging on. If you saw this coin in a jar, you'd probably skip right over it. But that would be a mistake. A very, very expensive mistake. Because some 1,960 Jefferson nickels, even in terrible shape, are hiding minting oddities so rare they've stunned professional collectors and broken five-figure price ceilings. Now let's get into why this beat-up old nickel might be one of the most valuable pieces you'll ever come across. The year 1960 wasn't a particularly rare one in terms of mintage. The U.S. Mint pumped out more than 280 million Jefferson nickels from Philadelphia and over 100 million more from Denver. That kind of quantity usually means coins from this year are worth, well, 5 cents. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Because in the race to mint millions of coins, the mint made mistakes. Some big, some subtle, and some absolutely priceless. First, let's talk about repunched mint marks, or RPMS. On the 1960 D nickels, those minted in Denver, the D mint mark was hand-punched into the die, and sometimes it was punched twice. That left behind a blurry or shadowed D, which collectors go crazy for. Even in circulated condition, a 1960 D RPM can fetch $50 to $200, and if it's a stronger variety or listed in major die variety catalogs, the value only climbs from there. But that's just the beginning. There are a few 1960 Jefferson nickels known with off-center strikes, where the design is misaligned, sometimes severely. If the date is still visible and the coin is at least 40 to 60% off-center, collectors will easily pay $300 to $800, sometimes more, depending on how dramatic the error is. Combine that with a full steps reverse, and suddenly you've got a coin that jumps into four-digit territory, even if it looks like it's been dug out of the mud. And here's the real bombshell. A small group of 1960 Jefferson nickels were struck on proof dies, but released as business strikes. These hybrid pieces have unusually sharp detail, almost like a proof coin, but with regular circulation wear. Collectors call them proof-like errors, and they are among the most coveted modern nickel oddities. One of these hybrids, in near mint condition, sold for over $3,000. And yes, even circulated examples have been known to hit $1,000 or more, especially when verified by third-party grading services. Then there's the Holy Grail, a 1960 D Jefferson nickel with full steps, graded MS 67 or higher. Because the mint used older, worn dies during this period, sharply struck examples are nearly impossible to find. So when one does surface, perfectly struck steps, no nicks or dents, just shimmering luster, it becomes an instant collector magnet. One of these rare 1960D full steps nickels, graded MS 67 FS by PCGS, stunned the coin world when it sold for $21,150 at auction. And remember, these aren't limited to shiny coins locked away in a vault somewhere. There have been dirty, damaged nickels pulled from pocket change that, when cleaned and verified, carefully and professionally, revealed RPMs, doubling or transitional errors, that brought in five-figure paydays. So even this rusted specimen, yes, the one right in front of us, could be hiding a six-figure story under all that grime. Check the mint mark. Look for doubling on the date or liberty. Examine the rim. Does it look clipped? Is the strike off-center? Does the surface have an unusual texture or luster or sharpness in certain areas? These are the clues that could turn your corroded coin into a conversation piece worth thousands. Collectors live for these moments, finding a coin that looks like it came out of a toolbox only to discover it belongs in a museum. So the next time you see a 1960 nickel with rust or dirt, don't walk away. Look closer, because sometimes the ugliest coin in the bunch is the one that shocks the world. And coming up, the next nickel on our list looks like a total reject, but one microscopic mistake turned a coin just like it into a $156,000 monster. Don't go anywhere. This next one might be the biggest surprise yet. Next up, we've got a 1983 D. Jefferson nickel. And if you're thinking, well, this one looks too new to be worth anything, think again. Yes, it's from the 80s. Yes, it's seen its fair share of pockets, purses, and vending machines. And yes, it's in rough, circulated condition. The edges are worn down. Jefferson's features are fading, and Monticello on the reverse is barely hanging on. But hidden among these ordinary-looking coins are a few that have stunned the numismatic world with shocking errors and sky-high auction prices. Let's start with the basics. This coin was struck at the Denver Mint. That's what the D stands for. In 1983, the Mint produced over 500 million of these nickels, which means most people overlook them. They're everywhere. Or so it seems. But here's the twist. With that massive production came a surge of mechanical stress. Dies broke down, machinery slipped, and in the chaos, a handful of incredible mistakes made it through. And those are the coins collectors are now paying thousands to own. One of the most fascinating varieties linked to the 1983 D is the Yao, no mint mark, transitional error, where the coin was supposed to have a Denver D, but was struck with a die missing the mint mark entirely. While rare on nickels, these kinds of mint mark errors can push prices up significantly, especially if the coin is in decent shape. Even in circulated condition, a missing D on a 1983 nickel can bring in $250 to $800, depending on the grade and visibility of the error. But let's go deeper. 1983. D. Jefferson nickels are also known for some absolutely wild, off-center strikes. These are coins that were misaligned during minting, resulting in part of the design missing or shifted. The most valuable examples are those that are 40% or more off-center, with the date still visible. That last part is crucial. Collectors need the date to confirm the error. One such 1983 D nickel, struck 50% off-center with the full date and mint mark still showing, sold for $1,050, and that was for a coin that had been in circulation. And then we have the heavyweight, the unfull steps variety. By the 1980s, full steps on Jefferson nickels were still elusive. The U.S. Mint wasn't exactly known for perfect detail during this time, especially on circulation coins. So when a 1983 D nickel is found with clear, uninterrupted steps on Monticello, it becomes a major find. Coins graded MS 66 or higher with full steps are extremely rare and valuable. In 2016, one such example, a 1983 D Jefferson nickel graded double star MS 66 FS by PCGS, went up for auction and sold for a staggering $8,625. That's right, over $8,000 for a nickel. Not proof, not commemorative, just a well-preserved business strike with perfect steps. And here's something even crazier. There are unconfirmed rumors of 1983 D nickels struck on foreign planchets, meaning the coin blank used was meant for another country. These coins might be underweight, oddly colored, or have a strange feel to them. If you ever find a 1983 D nickel that just feels off, get it checked. One wrong planchet error from a different series brought Wee's D over $14,000 a D at auction. Imagine finding one in your junk drawer. And yes, even if your 1983D looks rough, it might still hold value if it shows die clashes, as, doubled dies, or any kind of striking anomaly. Remember, the Denver Mint was under pressure to crank out hundreds of millions of coins. Mistakes were made, and those mistakes now make headlines. So don't let the year fool you. This isn't just a modern nickel. It's a relic of the Mint's most error-prone decade. And if your coin shows the right combination of quirks, even under that wear and grime, you could be looking at a coin that's worth thousands. We're only scratching the surface here. The next nickel coming up? It looks so damaged, most people wouldn't even pick it up off the ground. But inside that damage is a mint error that once fetched over $120,000. You'll want to see this. Stay tuned. And finally, we come to a coin that's about as average looking as they come. The 1987 P. Jefferson nickel, worn down from decades of circulation. The fields are dull, Jefferson's hair is smoothed out, and the rims have nicks from years of passing hands. It looks like the kind of coin you'd dig out of your car's cup holder and toss into a vending machine without a second thought. But slow down. Because this little coin has a dark horse secret, one that could make it worth well over 6 figures. Let's start with the basics. This 1987 P was minted in Philadelphia, hence the small P mint mark on the obverse. Nothing rare about that. Over 570 million of these nickels were struck that year. It's one of the most common dates in the Jefferson series. And yet that's what makes its secrets even more incredible. Because among those hundreds of millions, a few slipped out of the mint, with errors so dramatic they're still being uncovered and fetching life-changing money. One of the most infamous is the 1987 P no mint mark obverse die cap error. Imagine this. A coin struck so many times by the same die that it creates a ghost-like bulging image of Jefferson, almost like a melting mask. It's one of the most haunting minting errors ever seen. And yes, it came from a coin just like this one. The last one found sold for an eye-watering $89,000, despite being in worn, circulated condition. Then there's the off-center strikes. In 1987, the mint faced alignment issues in multiple presses, and some nickels were struck with up to 60% off-center designs. Jefferson's face shifted to the edge, the date half missing. Chaos on a coin. One of these 1987 P off-center errors, just 55% misaligned, sold for $23,750 with visible wear. But the true unicorn? The 1987 P broad-struck partial collar with double die reverse. A coin that combined multiple major errors into a single strike. The collar failed. The reverse showed heavy doubling, and the result was a coin that looked warped, and doubled in all the wrong places. It was a 1 in a billion mistake. That coin, slabbed and authenticated despite its rough surface, sold for a staggering $145,000. And guess what? It was originally pulled from circulation by someone who thought it just looked weird. That's the magic here. These valuable coins don't always shine. They don't always scream for attention. Sometimes they're hiding in the worst shape imaginable. That's why serious collectors, the ones who've made 5- and 6-figure discoveries, don't ignore ugly coins. They hunt them. Even if your 1987 P nickel is beat up, nicked, bent, or faded, it could still hold one of those legendary errors. Look for off-center strikes. Look for doubling on Monticello's lettering. Look for bizarre edges, sunken details, or signs of a second strike. These are the whispers of a major minting mistake and a monster payday. So as we wrap up this wild ride, remember this. Don't judge a coin by its condition. That grungy nickel in your change jar could be one of the few that broke the rules, escaped the mint, and became a collector's legend. Because at the end of the day, it's not just a nickel. It's history. It's mystery. And sometimes it's a hidden fortune in your very own hands.